This lesson is about creating tables. Now, I'm showing you some code here I have in a file that is labeled MySQL bookpub reload for WAMP. Now, I showed you the database that we're using, the 4 tables, publisher, book, author, and book author. And here's where I'm creating these. I'm creating these out of this file that you can use anytime to reload the data. And I'll put this in your working files so you can reset the tables anytime you need to. But let's take a look at the create table statement. That's the first thing we basically do. The word create, table, those are the key words. Now, author is the name that I made up. You have to give each table a name. Now, tables are defined between an open parentheses and a closed parentheses. I could, if I wanted to, move this down to a line below. Okay? Now, within these parentheses, just to create a little space here, I have the column names themselves. Social Security number, last name, so forth, down the line. Right after each name, I have to specify a data type. Now, a data type is the kind of data that can be held in the column. And there's 3 basic types of data. There's character data or textual data. And what you see here, varchar, says that it can be of a variable length. We don't have to reserve 11 spaces. I have 11 defined here as the maximum length that can be held in this column. But the varchar says if I have something less than 11, then just store as much as you need. Don't use up the whole 11. Now, with a Social Security number, that should be always the same. In this case, a Social Security number is 9 digits with 2 hyphens in it. Now to the right here, I displayed the words primary space key. You may recall the primary key is something that we use to keep track of each unique row. Now, theoretically, a Social Security number should never be repeated. It should be unique per citizen. So hopefully, it'll always be unique. And we can use this field as a primary key. Now, by specifying this, we get some freebies. The column is automatically defined as not being allowed to hold null values. It has to have something in it, or if we try to put a row in the database without a Social Security number, it'll object. It'll give us an error message. It also says that it has to be unique. It builds what's called in the game a unique index on that column that in the database will ensure that we never put in a duplicate value. It'll give us an error message. Now let's go down. I have last name, and again I have a varchar, and this time I defined the length of the varchar as being 40. That means my last name could be up to 40 characters, not past that, but up to. But if my last name is Lee, it'll only hold 3 characters because it is a variable character. And I said that I want this to be not null. Essentially that means it's a required column. We're not going to allow a row to go into the author table unless you give it a last name. Let's go down here to the phone number. Again, a varchar, but this says null. And nulls mean that nulls are allowed. I don't have to know the phone number. As long as I know Social Security, last name, and first name, and that's all I provide, it'll let me put a row in the authors table. Now, if I don't have any other information, all those data elements or columns will have a value of null. Now later on in the class, I'm going to give you some statements on dealing with nulls. There's some special constructs that we use. But understand that it's not the same thing as a blank or a 0. It is null. It is own thing. Basically means it's missing, doesn't apply, we don't know. Something like that is what null means. Now, if you look above here, there's another statement called drop table. Drop table author actually gets rid of all the data in the author table, and it gets rid of the entire structure itself. And the reason that you see that I'm dropping the table right before creating it is this script in this program up here that I'm giving you is meant to be run multiple times. So the first time in, of course, this drop table author will give an error, and that's okay. It'll say there is no table author to drop. But from then on out, there'll always be an author table, and we'll drop it and then recreate it here. Later on in the script, there's statements that will populate these tables with data, but I'm going to hold that discussion off till a later time. I want to look at some different character data types that we have with create statements. Let's go to a different part of another table. If we look here in the book author table, I mentioned that there is an author order column, and I made that an int. It has to be an integer. And notice I didn't give it a size. There's a default size that's quite large, and both going to negative numbers and positive numbers. And for most common applications, you are not likely to exceed how much can be held in there. So we generally do not specify a number. That becomes an issue that can be looked up in the MySQL manual. Royalty share is defined as numeric 5,2. Now what that means is I have 5 numeric positions to put in the royalty share. 2 of them will be considered to be decimals. So if I had 68.50, that would fit into a 5,2 field. So that's what that means. It's 5 long. The last 2 are considered to be part of a decimal place. We don't actually put the dot in the definition, but when we enter data into this column with a dot, it'll know what to do. A dot for the decimal point. Now here's something also unique on this table. The primary key has to be both the Social Security number and the ISBN number. And I can't put that right after the column. Instead of not null, I can't put that right there and then put one there. It gets confused. If I need a combination primary key, I have to do it this way. The words primary key, column 1, comma, column 2, part of the key. I could have more than 2, but in this case I just have the 2. Okay, so this is a numeric type. We had numeric with decimal places. I could use the word decimal as well. And I used int for integer values. Let's go down into the book table. I have another data type here called date, and I said it can be null. So date is a special kind of database construct that knows how to deal with dates. It stores dates internally in a format that's a 4-character year, followed by a hyphen, 2-character month, a hyphen, and a 2-character day. But that's the internal format. There are other ways to deal with dates and functions to deal with dates that are in different formats and get them into the proper format that are being held by the database. The beauty of a relational database is, as much as possible, we don't have to think about how something's being stored. We just need to ask it the question the way it wants to hear it, so to speak. So those are the 3 basic types. There's numbers, there's character types, varchar, and date types. We can also store time and date time as well. This ends our first lesson on using the create table statement.